I've had a small accident here. My lights may have fallen over.
Have you knocked your half a pint over?
No, I haven't. The pint's safe, thankfully, so I'm okay. But I have to.
The lighting's smashed, but
I have to go and rescue the beer. Not the beer. I have to go and rescue the light a moment. So 2 seconds while I rescue it.
Do you think that's going to be on when Talking About goes horribly wrong?
Yeah.
And we can have Cheryl Baker say, and then he knocked his light over, but his pint was all right.
I love the flower that made him swear.
Did I swear then in that?
No, you didn't.
Oh, that'll be in the edit then. Right.
Hello and welcome to the series finale. We are talking about Doctor Who Series 1. This is the finale. This is the final 2 episodes. This is the pinnacle of the season.
It might not be, though.
It's anyway.
Oh, don't. It's too early to start.
Anyway, I love the script. No.
I dare not even say it, even if I did.
I don't mind what you say as long as you can back it up, my love. It's got to happen sometime. Don't forget, viewer, he's had a drink or 8. He's a little uncontrolled. He's broken his lighting rig. I don't know what else he's broken there. It's been a long build-up. Don't forget to like us, subscribe to us, all that magic. Notifications, I think I get those. I also get sort of women with boobs on Instagram that want to be my friend. But no, like us, subscribe to us, notify us, and all that. I am Paul or P-Bal, and I am joined by...
Hello, it's James.
And hello, it's Jason.
Not to be confused with Halo James, which is a late 80s pop group.
Have you cosplayed then, James?
I have cosplayed as Captain Jack this week in white t-shirt and black waistcoat.
Has he got the leather kecks on as well, or is that not for the viewers to know?
I can't at this stage show or explain. So
that's for the OnlyFans version of this recording.
If you go to the Ko-Fi link and the Patreon site, you'll be able to see whatever you want.
I've only been on one of the new series, so I can't be cancelled just yet.
I don't know. We've been trying to cancel Jason for years.
I thought we'd get a hologram of him this week. If this message has been activated, Jason is pissed again.
Well, it's a good job because you could have me quoting previously in our last recording if you really wanted me to.
Anyway, I'm sure you ladies are going to play nicely. Previously on Doctor Who and Series 1 of Talking About, here's the run. Jason's doing it. I don't know what this is. I'd have said it was a midlife crisis, but I'm 20 years too late.
It could be a midlife crisis, actually, because I am of that age where it could be midlife.
Who lives to 120?
Rude.
Anyway, previously on Doctor Who and the Series 1 Talking About, at the bottom of the pile is The Long Game on 16, above it End of the World on 18.5, Aliens of London World War 3 on 19.5, Rose on 20, into the top 5. In fifth place, it's The Unquiet Dead on 22 points. Joint third on 26 points are Dalek and Father's Day. And joint top, a lot of joints here. Joint top on 26.5 are The Empty Child, The Doctor Dances, and Boomtown, which is apparently set in Cardiff, which is where Jason is, in case anyone has missed that previously.
And James liked it so much he gave it a 10.
And?
It's his first non-telly snapped 10 points, viewer. I don't know how they watch these things. Anyway, this week we are going to be discussing Bad Wolf and the Parting with the Ways. I mean, both of those work as a Doctor Who and the Bad Wolf, Doctor Who and the Parting of the Ways. They're both good. And I believe It's going to be James that's going to be kicking off on this, isn't it?
I don't know what he's doing now. Honestly.
Do you know what? He got the vibe of Dusty Bin then when he was doing that.
In Dusty Bin, or he was pretending he was a long distance lorry driver. You know, just like what?
What I do behind the scenes here is my business. You shouldn't be telling the viewer what I'm up to.
I honestly think Jason is our Dusty Bin. He just runs on. We're not quite sure what he's there for, and then he goes off again.
To be fair, I do not always talk about what you do when you're not on the camera, because we wouldn't be here. Let me. Oh, I forgot what we're talking about. Bad Wolf. That's what we're talking about. So yes, it is the Series 1. I almost said it then. Series 1 finale, and the TARDIS team must tackle some terribly dangerous TV shows before finally facing off against an army of Daleks. That basically, this is like, we once again revisiting some of the earlier stories. So we had The Long Game, where we had Satellite 5, and we had Previously, but not with the word previously, dear fans, where the Doctor came along.
But it's about the previous events.
Yeah, well, they do a flashback, but they don't say the word previously. Let's move on from that.
What you said before we started recording.
Sure, it'd be in the edit. Exactly. So we're
not just me that does things on the camera behind scenes.
Why? I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, you could tell it's the end of the series, can't you? We've all gone a little bit stir crazy. So we're back on Satellite 5. The TARDIS crew were on their way back from dropping off Margaret, the egg, to a new family, and they have all been essentially hijacked from the TARDIS and put into sort of modern, sort of futuristic versions of TV shows that were on in its day. I know obviously Weakest Link has recently come back, but some of the others, don't. Big Brother is that back now?
Coming back.
It's coming back, and Trinity and Susanna. But what you get with this episode is something you see Russell T Davies do a number of times, which is what? I don't know what you're pointing at now.
Nothing. I'm not pointing at anything.
Okay. What you get is Russell T Davies' love of sort of popular culture, and you see this in sort of finales in his era, and here you see it very directly with the Big Brother, with the Weakest Link. So they're all sort of put into these familiar types of TV shows, which end up with a killer twist. At the end, we've got an introduction to lovely Linda with a Y. I'm sure we will talk about her as we go through. And so the first episode is all about them escaping from these rooms and trying to find out who is ultimately behind it all, which, spoilers, is the Daleks. And then the second part of the story is the Dalek invasion of the Satellite 5, and then the sort of the choices the Doctor makes at the end of that story, which we'll come on to. So there you go. That's our series finale.
I actually really like the way they fuse the sort of the modern cultural references. Okay, they twist it, but I loved that at the time that they blended it together, and you had all these killer Big Brother houses and the killer Weakest Link games and so on and so forth. And again, it's taking something that we know and just putting that twist in there, making it deadly, but somehow it just seems to fit really well. Particularly when you think that this is set 100 years on from the previous time we saw Satellite 5, and the Doctor has to come back here and face some consequences, because the culmination of that previous story led to, with obviously the manipulation of the Daleks in the background, led to sort of Earth shutting down and sort of becoming reliant on this sort of popular culture. And it's interesting, actually, because it does, you know, if watching them today, watching them back then, you would never have thought it would have happened. But if you think about the reliance of society today on all of these sort of reality TV programs, you know, the Love Islands and all of that sort of thing, you know, these are big business these days. And really, I suppose we're only echoing that now, 20 odd years on, from where they were, you know, what they were prophesizing would be the case. I mean, I'm not suggesting there's a Dalek invasion waiting in the skies above us, but I just like the fusion of this, and it makes for a very unusual episode. And again, it's testing a boundary that hadn't been done previously, I suppose, in Doctor Who.
I think that the iconic moment probably is the pre-creds, isn't it, where TV's Doctor Who gets called to the diary room and is like, "This is Big Brother. Don't swear you're alive." And he's like, "You've got to be kidding," because it's such a. It took them about 11 months, I think, apparently, to negotiate the Big Brother bit. The others were a bit easier because it was sort of BBC product, but because it was a Channel 4 thing, I think it took a bit more wangling to get that involved. But yeah, it's an instantly identifiable thing, isn't it? So your audience knows the formats and all that sort of stuff. And you've got the humour of Trini and Susanna and Anne Robinson, which they were all in Brighton, weren't they? That first exhibition, I can remember.
Yeah.
Because they look a bit Playmobil, don't they? It's sort of Playmobil vibe.
Yeah, the sort of plasticky, chunky things.
Yeah, it's great, and it's well played out. I think the weakest link. I mean, the android's probably not as unpleasant as Anne Robinson is. Actually, it's probably slightly more kind-hearted than the real thing. And I suppose you do lapse into the Captain Jack where he's kept the gun scenario and all that.
Where were you hiding that?
Jason's got a machine gun, so please don't bring that up.
I mean, it's certainly playing to, you know, because Jack is certainly accused several times in this story of flirting. Whenever he just says hello to somebody, he's flirting. Or, you know, obviously the story is now really developing around the character of Captain Jack Harkness, and again played a little bit for laughs, which I kind of like.
But I guess, I mean, although they did have to edit his bum out, didn't they? I believe there were the BBC were like, we're not having all this bum in this. It does start. I mean, it doesn't start light, but it gets darker as it goes through. It does, you know, immeasurably. It's got that kind of waft of an earth shock or something about it, where it's the stakes get heightened, don't they? And it becomes a bit darker and darker as it goes on. Although there are little shades, I think, of previous things, not in this season, like I would almost say there's a waft of the Wheel in Space. I mean, you look at the Dalek plan there to invade the Saturn. There's just a whiff of the Wheel in Space there, and the controller character. I would say there's a lot of remembrance that the Jasmine Breaks girl. You can see that's a progression of that. The Daleks having the entity that they've, you know, fed into the computer. That I think there's shades of that. The controller character is creepy and tragic in sort of equal measure. And I think that's a really nice performance from Martha Cope for that. Because it's horror, and of course, because you don't, I mean, you know now, but you don't know instantly what the situation is, and you presume that she's dragged in there because she's part of it, and then it's revealed that she's not, and she's trying to end the Dalek problem. But you don't get a lot of Dalek in the first part, do you? Which is interesting. It's build to the reveal. I mean, I think because obviously the trailer the week before, the next time trailer at the end of the thing, if you didn't want to see it, you wouldn't have seen it. But I can't imagine many people didn't know the Daleks were coming in this one.
It was.
I know that the second part, the BBC trailers went crazy, didn't they? There were lots of 5 days and sort of spaceships and all that stuff. They ramped it up. I remember it was a big thing, the finale. I think people pretty much knew the Daleks were going to be revealed Although there's some nice shades of how it's directed, aren't there? There's lots of nice sort of reflective shots before you see the full reveal. It's nicely directed in that sense.
I think it was all over Doctor Who magazine, wasn't it? They trailed it. It wasn't in the next time trailer, wasn't it? It focused on the game shows for.
No, I think there's the little bit where it says the Dalek says we are detected, something like that. I think it's literally the last bit of Dalek from this episode is in the next time trailer.
I think you get the Emperor's voice in the next time as well, just because that next time that could be Davros. Yeah, I remember back in the day. I think the voice is right at the very end of the trailer, and
that's in the trailer for the second part.
Oh right, yeah, for the trailer for the second part, yes, of course, yeah. That's what.
But there's a bit of Dalek in the next time for the first part, you get the Emperor voice in the next time for the second part, because you get Christopher turning around, but you don't see what he's reacting to, you just hear it.
Because back in the day, for me, I'd convinced myself it was Davros, by the way, that they were bringing
back.
There
was the prop for the Emperor Dalek was pretty naff, and they ditched it after this story, but there was, at one point, they were not sure whether they would be able to use it at all, and so there was a backup plan, which was it would have been Davros. At this point, they were like, if we can't do a big Emperor Dalek, then we'd have to have a replacement. And the early thought around was that they would have Davros brought in at this point, but obviously that didn't happen. They went with the prop and the CGI, and the rest, as we know, is history.
I think what works well in this two-part is you get the whole build-up. It doesn't feel, you don't automatically assume we're building to some big climax at the end of the sort of Bad Wolf episode. You're thrown in. You've got this sort of modern game show thing. You're working out some clues as you come through it. It builds and builds and builds. You then realize there's some sort of big bad monster out there, and it sort of becomes revealed. The second part is a completely different level to the first part of the story. And this is why I think this two-part works really well, because it is such a different tone that's presented then by the time you're into the second one. And to be perfectly frank, whilst we got CGI Daleks in abundance in years to follow after this for me as a Dalek fan was absolutely amazing when this was visualized, when I watched this, when it first aired, because this is how we would always have wanted to have seen the Daleks, hundreds and thousands of them flying out of spaceships and being that, being a real force. I mean, all those spaceships and all those Daleks, the stuff of dreams when, you think back to Day of the Daleks, when there's clearly only 3 Daleks progressing across the lawn. And it is a different era, and it's a different part of the show. But I think what they did here was they took a familiar monster and really delivered on the promise of what they could do with the technology of its time. Now, I think it's overdone in following stories, but this was quite epic for its time, in my opinion. Seeing all those Daleks, particularly streaming out of the ship in the second episode.
I think that's an impressive shot, and I think because it's the first time we've seen it, I've said this before, and I still feel that when there are fewer aliens of whatever sort, I find that more menacing than when there are hundreds of thousands of them, because it's kind of like, that the Doctor's going to have to come up with some flashbang woozy thing to make them all go away. And the thing that I find most chilling, and I do like it as a Dalek story, is the Linda scene where the Daleks are on the outside of this spaceship. She's inside and the Doctor's like, oh, you're perfectly safe. And you can see them cutting through, and you think, oh, any minute now they're going to cut through and they're going to kill her. And then while she's talking, you see the Daleks rising outside the spaceship. And you don't hear the exterminate, but you see the flashing lights. And every time I watch this, in my head, I hear the word exterminate, even though it's not said, because the lights flash. And then she dies. So I think there are some real moments of proper Dalek cruelty, if you like, where they go into the space station, they go down because that's where all the people are at the bottom of this. They simply just want to exterminate everybody. They're not, they are focusing on the Doctor and his plan to save the day, but they're not, they're not averse to just like, oh, we'll take a trip downstairs and just slaughter everybody down there as well. So I think there is, I think in later stories, I think you're right. There's almost too many. It's just like, oh, what, when they all come out of the streets of London and everything, it's just like, okay. But here, I think you're right. There is that visual that we've already seen one Dalek kill pretty much everyone on a base. Now we're seeing hundreds of thousands of Daleks and just how cruel and devastating they can be. I mean, almost the destruction of the planet, and you see the map of the world as it's changing while the Daleks are bombing it, is still not as impactful as the scene with Linda, where she potentially could have been a new companion, and we see her slaughtered in that sort of moment of pure Dalek evil.
I'd sort of have to argue on the sort of other side of that, is that when you get to next season, Army of Ghosts, you couldn't have that we've taken over Canary Wharf and we're taking over the world and just have the four of them. You've kind of, if you're doing a world-wide spectacle, you've got to have the multiple situation. Yeah. I mean, something like Remembrance of the Daleks, it honestly, there probably should have been a lot more Daleks sort of patrol. It should have been, the scaling would have been there. I get the notion. I do think like something like Horror of Fangorok, where you've just got the one killing Rutan that's in that thing, it works rather than saying there are 600 Rutans on the island and they're all bobbing about. But I'm saying it's sort of horses for courses. This story, if there'd have just been one Dalek going up and down the lift killing everyone, it wouldn't have felt epic, would it? I think you have to have the scale. It's the amount of them. And you can get the one, don't you, with the little cutting thing, the little cutting arm. That's very retro. That he's got the
bury the dead planet. But if you think back to something like Evil of the Daleks, which we certainly didn't watch it on its first airing, regardless of what you guys think. You imagine there to be an epic amount of Daleks in that story, just down to the idea of what happens to the Emperor in the final scenes. And we know how that's visualized. We've got plenty of photo reference for that. But as a kid watching Doctor Who, what we got in this episode was what I would have craved back. I would have loved to have seen hundreds of Daleks on the screen. They couldn't run to it. The budget and all of the effects and the technology at the time wouldn't do it. So this is why I think this story in particular is special to me, because of that fact. Because for the first time ever, the geek in me got to see those hundreds and hundreds of Daleks, and it didn't matter for this story that it wasn't the single Dalek or what have you as the threat, because the threat was so overwhelming here. Because actually, wow, how do they defeat? And we've never seen anything like this before. How do they defeat all these hundreds of thousands of Daleks? And that was I think the excitement I would have felt watching this on the original airing back in 2005.
Also, because the Linda thing and the Dalek outside that is a great exit. It's also interesting because I think by this point, having had the series play out how it has played out, you sort of have a false confidence maybe when he rescues her from the Big Brother house, doesn't he? He's like, you can stay here or I can save you, and you're like, or not going to kill Linda with a Y here, are they? Because she's too nice, and she's and there's lots of lovely bits, aren't there? There's that lovely bit where he says what his plan is, and she goes, well, let's do it. And before Rose can do it, and Rose's like, bitch, she's got my lines. And it's kind of like, you just don't expect, even when they're cutting through the door, there's still that thing of actually, Doctor Who's going to save her here, isn't he, at some point? And he doesn't. And I think that's the heightened point of this, because I know sort of early thoughts were, is Rose going to go? And then Chris decided he was going, so all that sort of stuff. So you can see that all bets are off here, really. And I think were it not for the fact they wanted the Captain Jack spin-off, he'd have probably been a gone. Because again, I remember watching on first viewing, and he gets shot, and you're like, crikey. that's it for him, and you know, it's his carnage. But it's quite funny as well, because I was thinking about this as well, because Captain Jack obviously doesn't come back for a long time, does he? I mean, he has his Torchwood obviously comes in, but he doesn't come back to the show itself for a really long time, actually, does he?
Season 3? It's the
Season 3.
Martha one, isn't it? The thing I do like about the finale is then we have all that epic battle going on, and you're right, Jason, it is epic, and there's, you know, everything you would really want from a proper Dalek story. It's like almost like the comic book, you know, you can do it on that big scale. Is then they have this cutaway where Rose is sent back to Earth, and you see her and Mickey and Jackie, and you have that whole scene where they're sat having a meal together, and Rose is like, I want to go back and save him, and you have the sort of flashback to Father's Day when Rose is like, yeah, but you don't understand who this person is, and she tells Jackie what he's done, and I love the fact that with all that huge drama going on, they're still able to do that character bit where they're just cut back to Earth, you know, decades away from the action, and just in a restaurant having that conversation, and they realize how much it means to Rose. And then you get sort of like Mickey and his Mini trying to open the TARDIS, and then Jackie turns up with that sort of, you know, lorry and just goes, you know, throws her the keys and says, you know, I need it back. But I love that the show's got the confidence to say, in the middle of all this huge epic finale, we're gonna do this. We're gonna have Rose. We're gonna send her home. We're gonna have her talking about, you know, what traveling with the Doctor has been like for her, and have her family say, right, okay, we're gonna help you go back to it. Having for all the, you know, all of this, every time she's gone home, they've been like, stay with us. You know, Mickey wanted to pick up her relationship, and Jackie wanted her to be safe.
But it's what changes it, isn't it, in that scene? Because there's that nice little scene in the TARDIS between them both, where she says, I was the girl, and they close off the sort of story loop from Father's Day.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, I think it's that stage, Jackie gets it. And that's why she's then willing to help Rose to go back and help the Doctor, because in fact, she realizes that the Doctor's helped Rose by being there for her father's death. And that is just played out in a couple of minutes, but that is just, it's just sublime in the way it's written.
I find that bit actually portrays Rose as actually quite deep. It's quite an unpleasant thing that she does there. She doesn't break it. She doesn't say, Mom, I've got something to tell you, or what happened was this. She does it to be spiteful. She does it for the reaction, and she gets the reaction because obviously Jackie's really upset to go. But she doesn't do it in a nice, the intention is not, it's because she's not getting her own way, and she uses it, and it's a horrible thing to use. And she throws that at her, and she's like, don't say it. She instead of being, I think that's quite a, and I suppose going forward into the next season, we see even more of that kind of Rose sort of selfishness that comes in. And I think we discussed this sort of quite early doors about her just legging it and not, but that scene especially, I felt that was quite an unpleasant turn from Rose. But obviously, you know, Jackie forgives her. She's got a boyfriend who's got a lorry. It's all fine. But but I suppose the whole thing is that slight Pyramids of Mars thing, isn't it? Because she could theoretically stop in 2005, and nothing would change for her. She could just live her life, and nothing would matter. But she doesn't. She becomes the bad wolf.
And here, I alluded to this in a previous recording. I sometimes have a slight issue with some of Russell T Davies's resolutions, and it is, I'm not saying particularly for this story, but later on when we're talking about other seasons for Russell T Davies, it does always feel like it's like huge build up to something that is then defeated within 60 seconds. It's like oh this happened and then this. I think there is an element of, we only just found out in Boomtown that the TARDIS could open, and it's the power of the time vortex could be released, and then the next episode she's taking on board all the power of the time vortex and becoming this bad wolf super creature, if you like.
But this is down to format though now, isn't it? And back in the day we had 4 episodes, we had 6 episodes, we had 8 episodes, we ratcheted it up. The end resolve was still quite quick, and you didn't get your resolve until your last episode, and even then it happened quite late. This is building tension and continuing to build tension, and that's the style of writing that works in this series, because it builds and builds and builds. And yes, okay, the results are quite quick, and I remember I've been critical of those in the past myself for the new series, but I think if you build and then spend 15 minutes resolving it, you've lost that sort of tension. And I think that doesn't work in the modern dramatic of a 45-minute installment of television.
I think that the introduction of it in the Boomtown before is also, again, another important part of having Boomtown, is that it shows what that is. And obviously Margaret, the reaction for her doing it, she turns into an egg. I suppose Billie, Rose, it's a different action.
Well, she wants to save the Doctor, doesn't she? Margaret wanted a fresh start in life. She wanted to have another opportunity to live her life again. Rose wanted to save the Doctor, so she got the power to do that. It's the telepathic circuits, apparently.
Which I think is fine, because I think sometimes you can't play hard and fast with factual occurrences in a show that's basically about a character who can change bodies and is in a dimensionally transcendental time machine. You can't be saying, well, that wouldn't happen in real life. It's kind of like, well, it's not real life. It's absolutely heightened fiction. So
I do like later on, I think in the next episode or a couple of episodes time, they make a reference to it. She says, "Oh yeah, if I do that ever again, I'll die." It's like, yeah, we're not going to use that particular sort of resolution again. It's like, yeah, we're done with that. That was just for that story, and now we're gonna move on. Because
the bad wolf thing is quite clever as well. Earlier on, that the Doctor assumes that it's the Daleks that have been doing the bad wolf thing. Although, funnily enough, in the episode before, I did think it is good when he's like, the words are following us. And he has a flashback, and he says the helicopter from Dalek. I'm like, did you hear bad wolf? Like, when did you hear that during the Dalek? I don't think you did you? But it's interesting. He assumes the Daleks are the ones who've done it, and when it turns out it's not, and they're like, "We don't know what you're talking about, mate." They don't use that actual line. It's interesting because then you're like, okay, so that's not what this is, and it's clever that you I mean, if anyone at the start of this thought it's going to be Rose with the vortex pouring through her, that's what it's going to be. Although my biggest regret in that scene when she does land and she starts doing all that is she doesn't say, "I see the day and night." She doesn't do her own song. The option was there. She does. She almost does the line. I'm like, come on, Bill. She could have just done, "I see the day, see the night, come on." But no, she doesn't.
She brings back Jack, but she doesn't bring back Linda because she stole her line from earlier on. She's like, she can do it.
She might have done. She might have brought a couple of them back. She might have brought Jenna Russell back. Jenna Russell basically wasted in this. What were they playing at? She's in both episodes. She's one of the few sort of makes it all the way through, and she gets a little bit of the sort of stage manager thing, and then she gets the death scene where they've just let them all go into cannon fodder. It's a little, I think poor Miss Russell is slightly wasted in this, although she could have sung something, couldn't she? She's big in the musical theatres, Jenna Russell.
Yeah.
Oh, never mind. But it's a big cast, though, is it? Having had just 3, 4, whatever the week before, it's a big cast, and there's a lot of faces.
slaughtered, don't they? It's quite. I mean, at the end, it's only. I mean, although Jack technically gets resurrected, he gets killed. The Doctor is killed. I mean, he has to regenerate. The only person that survives really is Rose, who has taken on the time vortex. She's the only survivor left.
They make a reference to escape ships, don't they? And there not being enough escape ships.
Yeah, because that's why the rest of them are all on the sort of lower decks, aren't they? Because there's no ships left for them to escape on.
But then if the Daleks are firebombing the Earth, do you want to be on an escape ship? I don't know.
Would you like to go to Earth and be exterminated or not? You do get our second person from classic era coming across into modern era, which is Nisha Naya, who was in Paradise.
She's an uncredited Kang. Come on.
What is it?
Oh, I love this dark web you go to every week. It's amazing.
She was in it.
I'm waiting for James to pull up the tally snap where he can point to Nisha in the Red Kang lineup.
I won't say he played off the back of the first episode again just to make sure that the previously wasn't there, but that's another story.
Yeah, it's. Oh, come.
No, I'm just sorry.
He's too busy.
I'm still amused by your dark web reference there. It's very interesting though, because I didn't know that.
Did you genuinely not know that before?
No.
You kids. Patterson Joseph is really good, and they kept rumouring him for a long time that he's going to be the next Doctor Who. I think a couple of times, like, well, he's going to be the next Doctor. He's going to be, and he obviously he hasn't been. But again, he's someone who it's a good role. But it'd be nice if you could come, bring him back, give him another role, give him something bigger. I mean, it's a horrible character, isn't it?
He is. Yeah.
And even down to just before he's exterminated, all he's interested in is where's my credits? Where's my credits? That's all he wants.
I won. You can't kill me. I won. Where's my money? It's just like, yeah, he is quite ruthless in that. And you even get that moment where Rose is like, why did you save me? And he's just like, because you're stupid and I want to be in the final with you. It's kind of like, I'm going to tell you right now. I mean, I remember watching that episode the first time when Rose is hit by the android, and there was, at that moment it was like, have they just killed off Rose? It's like we've got to the finale and they've killed Rose. It's quite. That was quite a moment in that episode. Obviously, you subsequently find out that it was a teleporter that she was teleported out, but it is. Bearing in mind all the things you've heard about all the other different houses and how people have died, there is that feeling of like, oh, they've killed her off. There is quite a darker tone to it.
And of course, we knew as an audience, we knew that Christopher Eccleston was leaving, because I mean that was pretty much in the domain from pretty much the first episode on that was it. He was going.
Supposed to be. It was the third episode. It was the BBC did a press after Unquiet Dead.
But that's the point I'm trying to make though, is that we already knew, it's relevant where it is, we already knew he was leaving. So had they, for whatever reason, killed Rose, or the character Rose, off at that point, it wouldn't have been out of place to have done it at that time with a new Doctor just around the corner. Of course, obviously, we'd have been spoilt already and knew that wasn't happening. But it's an interesting place where you put it, and it's done very well again, because you're left with that, and it's played for that dramatic moment. The Doctor's there, and they're arresting him, and they're getting hold of Jack, and it's all done in slightly slow mo, and they're really playing on the emotion of that one scene. Yes, it gets paid off for the fact that she isn't, and she's been teleported, but it wouldn't have been out of place, given what we knew at that time.
It wouldn't. But the original plan was that Eccleston would be killed off at the last episode, but that wasn't. I mean, because the press release so early on in the run, and they were under pressure because there was a lot of rumor that David Tennant had already been cast as his replacement. So they were putting out stories around it.
I'm not convinced, James, because I think had Chris decided that he would have stayed for a second season, they wouldn't have been looking for a replacement. And I think this is entirely down to Chris's decision to step away from the process.
Oh, no.
It wasn't for him.
But the original plan by Russell T Davies was apparently that it was going to be a surprise regeneration at the end of it. They weren't supposed to say that he decided.
And how much of that is played out in retrospect, though? When you look back to it, he had to find a way out of the bad news story that was happening around him. There is no way he would have cast a doctor and then said, right, that's it, I'm gonna throw him out at the end of the first season. This was entirely down to Chris's actions of him stepping away. And that's just the way that the BBC swung the press stuff afterwards, surely.
I think what James means is that he didn't want the public to know that Chris was going once he'd made the decision that he was going.
Yeah.
Is that what you mean?
Yeah, but it wasn't Russell. Russell wasn't going to write him out though at the end of the first season. Had he sat there and went, "Oh, I'm really enjoying this," we'd have had Chris Eccleston for a second season at least.
He didn't want it announced that they knew Chris was going obviously before they were writing this because he had to incorporate. He didn't want because they knew before they'd even started launching the show, Chris had left. But they didn't want to launch the series off the back of their leading man having already quit the show because that's terrible. That's terrible promo. But then it leaked. I'm sure it leaked just after End of the World. I'm sure it was between the two. So it must have leaked in the Sun. Doctor Who star quit show. That kind of beautiful rhetoric they have, and then they must have done the official announcement maybe the week after. Unquite Dead said, yes, he is going. He'll be in it until the end of the season, and then Dave.
It was always my intention to write him out.
So I think it was the intention once he said he wasn't going to stick around, but I don't think they went into the first season saying he's here for 1 year. Because I think the idea was probably that Rose was going to be there for 1 year, and then
because originally Rose was going to be killed off. That was the original plan at the beginning of the season, was that Rose would be killed off at the end of the first season. But then
the Dalek transmat beam that takes them away to be harvested, that's a little bit Revelation of the Daleks, I felt, when they describe hulling everyone out and that being the result of the TV shows, because they presume on Earth, and they're happy on Earth that it means that they're all dead, which is awful, isn't it? They're happy that they're all dead on Earth, but the Daleks have done worse, and they've sort of scraped and sifted. They actually say sifted, don't they?
Sifted and pulped, yeah.
So
telling a billion was worthy of being a Dalek or something. It's really, and it's almost like, and we're selling the rest in it. You almost expect them to say, we've set up on the sideline, food for everybody, because that is what they do in Revelation. And you're just like, what do they do with the others? The other 999 million cells that they didn't use.
We'll find out when the Target book comes out. The other thing noticing is Dominic Burgess is on the panel for The Weakest Link. He's got a big Hollywood career now. He's got about 3 lines in this. It's really interesting, and I think you see it progressively as you sort of roll through this era, and it's inevitable as you roll through this era that there are sort of names who are stars now in very small parts, but there were small parts because they weren't at the level they're at now. But it's interesting to just see that kind of career progression, isn't it? People who think, crikey, they'd be the guest lead now if they could get them to do this. And yeah, that's part of the joy in some ways of going back and looking at the series now, isn't it?
Very young, fresh-faced British talent that hasn't quite. Yeah.
Even God bless her, Jo Joyner, because she's obviously, we know and love her for Shakespeare and Hathaway now, but it's funny because she's the little sprightly sort of girl, isn't she? And I know that I'm not saying she's an old bat now, or something, I'm not saying, but it's funny because it's 20 years on, so she's the sort of Rose, late teen, early sort of, did they like me? And it's just funny because now she's a woman, and it's a career thing, though, isn't it? You can just it is funny to see people in the sort of younger roles. I'm being shady. I'm not being. I'm being sincere.
I mean, it's still going to be another good 5 years or so before she crops up in EastEnders, isn't it? Mm-hmm. as mother of two. So it's
and about, is it 15 years before she does the live blunder?
Yeah.
Of course, Adam, Ian Adam. That's one. I mean, let's be honest with you. We haven't had the Buffy moment where we've had a musical episode, and we haven't had a live episode yet. But fingers crossed.
Oh, anything's possible now. Anything.
I'd love a live episode. I'd love it.
I
don't know whether they wanted to do this one live, because by all accounts, it was quite fraught. The last few recordings on this, it was quite tense, and things overran, and I think it was.
And I think hadn't at this point sort of Eccleston's relationship with Russell T Davies had pretty much fallen apart by that point.
What's Russ told you, Jason?
Well, there's been no discussion of it. No, I'm kidding. No, there hasn't. I mean, obviously, I think it's well documented now, isn't it, that there was tensions behind the scenes, James, really throughout this season. Chris wasn't terribly happy with the sort of creative direction that he was under. So I think obviously he was committed to it and signed into it. So, it wouldn't be at all surprising that by this stage, relations have broken down, but he was coming to the end of his contract, and it would be about right, I suppose. No, the tensions were there pretty much all the way through the season. If you read back and you retrospectively look at it. But of course, we're now presented with our first glimpse of modern regeneration. And of course, we don't know. We've seen regeneration in many, many forms over the years. And of course, we now get our first
yellow light
new series, explosion of regeneration. And that, again, was quite an epic effect.
It's the first time. I know you're probably going to say, no, it isn't. But it's the first Doctor to regenerate standing up, because all the rest were either on the floor or sat down. Oh, now you're thinking. Look, I can see.
No, they've all laid down previously, because it's easier to vision mix the lay down, because you could just lie down in the same position. Whereas in the modern age, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. They've got the
modern age, you go on the top of a cliff and go.
But what's nice about this now, I think, though, is that they have retained continuity of the regeneration. So every time we get that regeneration, okay, things explode around and all that, but the concept of the change is the same now each time, and I kind of like that consistency in the continuity on this.
Or don't you want Anthony Ainley to appear and start cackling, or some clips from previous adventures to just phase over the top?
No, I've always just wanted 100,000 Daleks on the screen.
I love that little pick and mix all sorts. You never quite know what effect they're going to do to the old series. It's like, how much effort we got? Actually, we haven't even got the Doctor here to regenerate. Get one of James's wigs on Sylvester. It's fine.
Yeah. I'm available for every regeneration sequence. I've got different wigs.
I think he really has. I think the great thing with Chris. I think the great thing with Chris is that he gets to the point where he's comfortable and he's in command quickly within this. I mean, I'm not just going to hate on Peter Davison here, but he hits Caves of Androzani and all of a sudden he understands it, and he's had all the adventures of not getting there. Whereas Christopher, although I think it would have been nice to have had another year with him, I don't feel that we don't think we lack in what he did, because I think he got there quick enough to be powerful and to be a Doctor, or the Doctor, during this run. Yeah, so it would have been nice, I think, another year.
Mm-hmm. Agree.
Maybe 2, because I think 3 years is probably a good run for people, isn't it?
Agree.
But I don't feel that it's that kind of thing where he gets his regeneration and you're like, oh, he's only just hit his stride. I think he's hit the stride and he knows where he's at with it.
By the time he gets to the end of the season, irrespective of what's going on behind the scenes, he's too professional and he has hit the mark. And it's slow, because obviously I think the whole concept of bringing Doctor Who back, it had its teething problems, full stop. It wasn't just, Christopher having to find his part or Billie having to find her part. There were all sorts of, what do we do with this? What do we do with that? And you can certainly see it in the early episodes of this series, where it is clearly quite fledgling. And, Phil Collinson himself said, they turned up and they weren't really sure what they were going to do or how they were going to do it, and whether they keep this or whether they keep that. So you kind of get that for the first few stories. But then Chris finds the sort of groove with it, and he and Billie work well together. And I do think that bringing the character of Jack in sort of helps that a little bit as well. But by the time you get to this, yeah, I wanted another season. You know, I do feel shortchanged that we didn't get another year or two, because I think his portrayal of the Doctor, looking back in retrospect, is actually very, very good.
It is. I mean, they weren't sure whether or not a revival of Doctor Who was going to work at the very beginning. I mean, before it started going out, they weren't sure what the audience were going to make of it. And I think, and I'm not going to say that it's purely down to Eccleston, because there's lots of elements that we've all talked about this.
No, I agree. It's not. It's entirely not down to that. This is the sum of its parts, James.
Yeah, but it is his portrayal of the Doctor. I really think is it's similar enough to previous Doctors. There are elements you can go, oh, I think it's a little. I remember everyone going, oh, I think he's a bit this, and I think he's a bit that, and I think you kind of read whatever your favourite Doctor was into his behaviour or into his mannerisms or into the things that he said. But I think that his performance was such a good platform for the subsequent Doctors that have come along. It was like, here's the Doctor, this is what he's about. You see him quite stripped back, because we didn't learn about the Time Lords and the Time War until later on in this. We didn't get all the, here's 40 years of Doctor Who history that you've got to know every single thing about him before you could understand the character. He just went in and was like, I am the Doctor. This is who I am. And all through this first series, there are these moments where they examine the Doctor's behaviour, they examine the companion, they examine the people around them, and it really sort of sets that template for other Doctors to come along and say, right, I'm going to be a different person to this, but at the same time, I'm still going to be, at my core, this person. And I think that Eccleston does that brilliantly. And you're right, it's a shame you don't get more of him than just that season. But it is what it is.
Well, I would argue that I think David takes it to a next level on popularity, and I think he really hit a chord with people. I think people liked the first season of the series, whatever the first series of Doctor Who. I think they liked it, and it became a big thing. But it became a huge thing with David. And I think there was an element, I think, of it being the first time Doctor Who got that kind of where he had a people found him sexy, or there was a sort of an interest on that level. And I think it just shifted up a level with people being into it. I think. Do we have any data from the dark web that you would like to share that wasn't shut down on Platform 5?
Do you know what? I have to say, this is my favourite part of the instalment.
A lot of it we have covered through our conversation. There was no press preview for this. Going back to what we were saying about, it was originally going to be a big climactic ending where no one knew. They did show it at the BAFTAs a few days beforehand. They showed the final episode, but originally there was no press preview available for the final episode. This is our first Torchwood reference. So we've had Bad Wolf all the way through this series. We're now about to start our Torchwood reference count as we go into series 2. So that's during the Weakest Link. It's the first time we hear the word deadlock seal, which becomes a well sort of like troped out sort of thing of why the Doctor can't get into something because it's deadlock sealed. And originally they weren't sure that Anne Robinson were going to do the voice, so they hired an Anne Robinson impersonator, and she actually said, "Yeah, I'd love to do it." So there we go. That was it.
Must remember which story the first reference to a deadlock seal came in.
I don't know whether
Has Richard Attenborough ever done anything about the deadlock seals?
I'm going to be honest now. Ever on, I'm going to be watching out for references to the deadlock seal.
It becomes an overused thing. it's one of those things. It's like, oh yeah, deadlock sealed. It's like wood. Later on, it's like, oh, it's made of wood. You can't use a sonic screwdriver on it. It's just, there we go.
Excelled yourself there.
Thank you very much for those facts. Right, I'm gonna go for some scores.
Indeed, let's go for some scores. I'm still marveling at the deadlock seal. That's it. I'm never
like the
watch
Elgin Marvels. They're quite contentious.
I'm never going to watch another episode of modern Doctor Who without looking out for the deadlock seals. I'm expecting it now, James, in every episode.
If you'd like me to reference every episode,
I just want it now in every episode from here on in. I've got those high expectations. That's what I'm desperate for now as we go forward. Okay, a brilliant way to end the season. We have slowly burnt through the Bad Wolf setup, and we've learned a lot about the characters as we've come through this series, but it all plays out in what is actually a tale of two halves for a two-part conclusion to the series. Obviously leads up to a regeneration, as we've already said. I think both episodes in this doubleheader work really well. I will always geek out over the millions of Daleks or whatever we had on screen, because that for me as a Dalek fan was brilliant. It was the comic books brought to life, as you've said already in here. I think it's a great end to the season. You've got brilliant cast list in across both these episodes. But the playoff and the fact that you've got Rose, who becomes the Bad Wolf, who goes back and saves the Doctor, that forces the Doctor to regenerate. It might seem like quite a quick resolve, but I think it's quite epic in some parts in its conclusion. No surprise, the way that I've talked about this story. This will be my 10 for Eccleston, so it's a 10 for this double part story.
Have we reached a pinnacle?
I avoided using either of those words. I think I might have used epic. Actually, that's a new one.
Is it a deadlock pinnacle?
Oh, it could well be. I mean, everything will be a deadlock pinnacle from here on in. But
previously on Deadlock Pinnacle.
If I'm honest, if an episode doesn't have deadlock seal in it going for, it's having a point taken off it automatically now, because my expectations are massively built up here for this. No, look, it might have one or two tiny little things that you might look through and go, but I love that whole mix of bringing the sort of modern culture into that first episode, and then you build Daleks. But it's a 10 all day long. It's a 10.
I love how you give it a 10 and then start going, but it does have its faults.
No. Look, it's epic Daleks that make it for me. So, okay. But it's a 10 all day long.
All of the day and all of the night, it's a 10.
And I deadlock seal my score in.
Ooh. You didn't do that previously.
Well, I'm doing it now.
Well, yes, okay. I mean, I do. There are elements of the finale that I do love, and I've talked about most of them. The scene with Linda. I do like the contemporary game showy thing. I think the danger with that is that it ages as you go through. So if I was watching this for the first time, would I particularly, if I was a young person watching this for the first time, would I particularly know who Trini and Susanna were? Probably not. You'd still get the humour and still get the gist of what that scene is. I think there's always a danger when you use contemporary stuff like that. But it works. And it was at the time, it was like, wow, he's on Big Brother. Like you say, that moment when he sat down on the chair and you hear Davina's voice, it's very, it's very of its moment. Yes, it is good to see thousands of Daleks, but I am not in the same camp as Jason, where I love to see hundreds of thousands of Daleks. It does somehow, for me, take away some of the menace, and particularly when they're resolved just by Rose turning them all to dust at the end. And why does he have to kiss her to get the energy out of her? Anyway,
why not?
Oh,
Why
come on!
not?
It's literally it's a moment. It's a kind of it's a climatic moment in the drama as the music is built. She's like, oh, it hurts, I'm dying, and he just embraces her, and it's a climatic moment. If he's just been like, all right, love, come over here and just cough into my hand, it would probably lack the impact. I think. I know.
Just come and
put it out there.
Spit it into the console. But no, it is. All that aside, it is, it's an enjoyable finale. It's not, for me, my favorite episode of the series. I've already discussed that. So I gave this a 9.
I know you were going for like a 5 or something the way you were moaning on. Like, I don't like this and I don't like that, and the other things I don't like about this.
Oh,
and
like, that kiss. Oh, no. 9.
I don't know whether in the last couple of it, whether it's kind of something like, we've got to New Earth early, and there's been a bit of a swap situation going on here. James has had some of Jason's contrary pills. I don't know what's happened. Doctor, what is it? Anyway, cliffhanger's first episode, absolutely probably one of my favorite cliffhangers. I still get a bit kind of like, because it feels, it's big. I can remember that the finale coincided with my friend Jenny's wedding, so I went to the wedding, went home, watched the last episode, and then I went to the evening do. It's fine, she's a Star Wars fan, she understood. It was all good. She's like, how was it? It's like, it was all right. Tear-stained face, like, it was all right. So yes, yeah, I think it's the pinnacle of the season. So I awarded. Look at that! I've gone. Look, that wolf is in me.
Wow!
I think it's just late night and I'm quite tired. 10 points.
Yay!
Yeah. What has that done to the scores, dear viewer? So, in 10th place and at the bottom, even though it features in the previously section of the winner, The Long Game, sadly on 16 points.
Well, that's got a deadlock seal now, hasn't it? That's what I'm saying.
9th place, we have End of the World on 18.5. 8th place is Aliens of London World War III on 19.5. Rose on 20 points. And then 6th place is The Unquiet Dead on 22 points. Joint 4th are Dalek and Father's Day on 26 points, half a point ahead. Joint 2nd are The Empty Child, Dr. Dances and Boomtown. And with 29 points, the winner is Bad Wolf, Parting of Ways. So popular, it has got its own B&M box set, which has been reduced in all the stores. It's true. It's about 15 years too late. If that had come out when this was around, people would have lapped up that hologram and all that stuff. But now, we've had these figures before 8 times. So, worthy winner?
Yes, I think it is a worthy winner. I mean, Boomtown's a great episode, but I think these two do tip the scales over the top of that one, bar none. And I definitely think right result.
James is like, justice for Boomtown.
I think he's caught in his own deadlock seal there.
Oh, listen to him. He's got a new word he can use.
Anyway, we're all offered for jelly and jam and happy times and shaking hands and being friends. Thank you very much.
Thank you as always.
Yes, indeed. Thanks very much. Pleasure as always.
And we shall see you soon for more talking.